you can see the Lemans is becoming a total mess. And today, we're not going to fix that, but we are hopefully going to get these motor mounts all fixed so that the oil pan doesn't hit the cross member and the engine is mounted into the chassis. Because then I can do much cooler things like exhaust and wiring and bolt on the intake and all that jazz. One thing that I will point out though is you can see I have an angle gauge on the top of the engine showing around 5 degrees. I think ideally the engine is supposed to be at like 3 or 4 degrees. But things to keep in mind, you know, flat tires will change that, and if the transmission mount is destroyed, that will change that. There's a bunch of different things that factor into the angle of the motor mount, or of the motor. So I'm going to get it in the ballpark. I'm going to try and get it under 5 degrees, and then I'm just going to pretty much ship it. So, moving on, let's take a look at the engine mounts, and I'll show you where I'm at. All right, so you can see I just put an 1/8 inch steel round piece under this motor mount, and I did the same thing on the other side, and this is just sort of to test and see if the oil pan is going to hit my cross member, and let's take a look and I'll show you how it looks. Okay, so you can see that there is now space around the bottom of the oil pan, and the wheel, the steering wheel is cut all the way to the right, and although it looks super tight, the linkage is not actually hitting the oil pan. It is very tight, but it's not quite touching. So I think if I just do an 1/8 inch spacer on each side of the engine, I think it will be enough to keep the linkage from hitting and keep the oil pan from hitting. So I guess I'm going to start off by making a couple spacers for the motor mounts and seeing where that takes me. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so I've got both the motor mounts sitting on a piece of 1/8 inch steel plate, and you can see I've kind of scratched some marks into the steel plate where I'm going to cut it and drill it, of course. So I've done that to both sides. This is the left side. This is the right. We'll put a big R on it so I don't forget. Alright, so now I'm going to cut it out. You can pretty much use whatever you want to cut these things out. Cut-off wheel, bandsaw, or if you happen to have a plasma cutter, that's obviously a really great option. The one that I have is a Hypertherm PowerMax 30, and I absolutely love it. looks like it's pretty good. And so does that one. So I'm actually just going to leave the metal right here and right here. There's really no reason for me to cut it out. Because that part sits right on the frame. So it's just kind of pointless. It doesn't matter if it's there or not, so I'm not going to go through the work of cutting it out. So now I'm going to drill out all these holes so that I can mount them on the frame, and we'll see how that goes. So now I gotta go grab my drill. Yeah, you'll probably notice I'm a little shaky. That's because it's only about 20 something degrees outside right now. 20, 25 maybe? I think we may approach the freezing point today, which will be great. So anyways, I'm gonna now start off by drilling these with a small drill bit, and then I'll go to a bigger drill bit after I get the pilot holes done. Alright, so now I got all the holes drilled out. I made the holes slightly bigger than those in the motor mounts, just for ease of installation. And you can see there's some like sharp burrs on all these holes. So I'm going to run over it with the grinder again just to smooth it out. And then I'm going to throw it in the car as a test fit. And if it works, then I guess I'll take them back out and paint them black and put them in permanently. I think that this is going to require some adjusting of motor mounts on the engine. I might have to drill some holes bigger or something like that. But for now, I'm gonna grind these smooth, and then we'll try and fit them in the car. All right. Awesome. Now it won't be sharp enough to cut me. All right, let's try and fit them in the car. Okay, so you can see the hole doesn't line up quite right. And that's because we put the spacer on both sides. And with the spacer on both sides, since this is at a 45-degree angle and math, basically stuff doesn't line up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull both of these black motor mounts out, and I'm going to oblong the holes in them, in each one, by half of this distance, and hopefully that will allow the engine to sit properly in the holes and still not hit the linkage or have the oil pan touch the frame. So, lots of trial and error here. I'm gonna pull those motor mounts right back out again. Now, I could certainly cut these holes out with a grinder, but, or even like a bigger drill bit probably. But I have a plasma cutter, so why on earth would I not use the plasma cutter, right? So that's what we're gonna do. Hook it up, hopefully not burn myself, and get to cutting. Maybe wood's not the best backer on that. All right. Now I'm going to run a file through this and clean up all the edges on both sides. So we're back at the car, and I put the motor mounts in and still couldn't get it to line up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull off the rubber mounts, and I'm going to bore out these holes a little bit so they're oblong as well. And hopefully that gives me enough space. I'm so close right now, but just not quite there. So I'm going to pull off these and kind of bore out these things a little bit as well. And yes, I realize I could just buy a motor mount kit for this and just bolt the whole thing in. But I'm cheap. That's life. Trying to do this on $0 budget. So yeah, I'm gonna take these off, bore out the holes. Okay, so now I've got these two motor mounts, and I am going to basically bore down in these holes to make them oval instead of circular on both sides. And I'm hopeful that that will allow enough slide in the mounts to actually mount the engine into the car. I think this is my 100th attempt, so we'll see how it goes. Alright, this seems hard to believe, but everything is installed. On both sides I have all the bolts in, and the oil pan is not hanging the cross member at any point. And the steering, if you look really close, it's not hitting. I have about, I don't know, a hair in between. So that's pretty exciting. So I am going to take all of these mounts right back out again because I want to paint them all. Even though the frame looks terrible, the engine looks terrible, I hate leaving bare metal on a car because in Massachusetts it'll rust up pretty much instantly. So I'm going to take this stuff off and I'm going to paint it. But before I paint it, I'll do a quick recap of how I made all of this fit so that whoever watches this in the future will know what to do the first time and not have to dick around with it like I did for many days. Alright, so now we take it all back off again. Alright, before I take it completely out, I just want to brag about one thing. Look how easily these bolts go in and out of the motor mount now. This is like exactly how things are supposed to work, which is really nice. Alright, anyways, pulling them off. So in the interest of doing a recap to save the next person some trouble, these are motor mounts for a small block Chevy. They're probably the same for some giant year range, probably from the, I don't know, 50s or 60s up until the 90s. These are, I think they were like $6 a piece or something crazy. They're super cheap. And what I did was, on the backside, there was a bump right here. I don't know what the purpose of it was, but I ground that flat on both of them. And then on the bottom sides of the bolt hole, I ground it so it was oval. So you can see like this. So yeah, grind that down or cut it down, drill it down, whatever you want to do, to make the hole oblong, oval. I don't know if oblong is a normal word or not. It's something that my mom says. Anyways, so then on the motor mount side, or on the frame side, these are mounts for a Chevelle, and not the 307 V8. It's for the 350s and I think the big blocks as well. So yeah, these are just frame mounts for a Chevelle, and I did the same thing on these, where I did the top half of these oval. So I basically just stretched out the bolt holes. And then I made 1/8 inch spacers to go between the frame mount and the frame. So yeah, those go like that. And then, if this will stay here for just a moment, the bolt slides through here. Maybe. Alright, well, you get the idea. Anyways, yeah, so the bolts slide through. It all fits. I'm using a Silverado truck oil pan with the sump shortened so that it doesn't drag on the ground while I'm driving the car around. And yeah, this is the selection of parts that I used to make this whole charade happen. So now I'm going to take them inside where it's above freezing, and I am going to paint them once they warm up. So that's where we're at. Once they're painted, I'll put them back on the car, but that'll be for the next video. So hope you enjoyed it. I'm glad to finally be at this point. All right, see you next time.